Okay, move that out of the way. Ah, as they said, the little girl said in Poltergeist, I'm back. My name is Jeff, for those of you who don't know me, and it's my privilege and honor to stand before you and, um, in my humble way, be a channel for spirit. We allow that Christ within us to express ourselves in terms of our divine inheritance, our divine identity. Um, we start a new power this month, and I get the honor of opening the door to this power of understanding. And, I do a little research for the talk, I do a little reading, then I do a little reflection, then I do a little reflection, and I realize I have to do some more reading, and then I do some more reading, and then I do some more reflection. So finally, I come to the conclusion that in terms of the power of understanding, I am understanding that understanding is a lot different than knowledge or intellect. Knowledge and intellect are kind of auxiliary to understanding. They kind of work. I mean, we get knowledge by finding the facts and storing them in our files or however we hold knowledge. But then comes the greater aspect of our divine nature to be able to understand our knowledge and the things and facts that we acquire as we go through our journeys here on earth. So we're talking about not only just understanding, comprehension, and putting two and two together, realizing that 5 and 5 does not make 11. There's certain laws that cannot be broken. Emily Cady talks about spiritual laws is like in the image of a triangle. There's only 3 angles to a triangle. You can't change that, right? 3 angles, triangle, triangle, 3 angles. They're immutable laws that cannot be changed. They just are what they are. And so our understanding is one of those laws in terms of our 12 powers. We have our 12 powers, they represent 12 aspects of our innate spiritual inheritance. There's a list of everything. We all know what they are. But understanding is probably one of the more powerful ones because it integrates everything that we experience in terms of our human experience here on this planet as spiritual beings. I would like to just maybe refer to our founder, Charles Fillmore, what he says about understanding. And he says this: God is supreme knowing, that in man which comprehends is understanding. It knows and comprehends in wisdom. Its comparisons are not made in the realm of form, but in the realm of ideas. It knows how to accomplish things. Spiritual discernment reveals knowledge, and intelligence are auxiliary to understanding, as I said. And I like what he says here is that there are 2 ways of getting understanding. One is by following the guidance of spirit, and that dwells within. And the other is to go blindly ahead and learn by hard experience. As what as I like to say, learn by the school of hard knocks. It says, I know what I'm doing, out of my way. And there's a saying that the form of ego means edging God out. So we think we got it all under control till we realize we don't. It's like the guy says, I got it, I got it, I got it, I don't got it. So once we realize that we need more than just our intellect, of understanding of things about this phenomenon we call life and our spiritual natures and spiritual identities. It's interesting that the theme of what do we stand on. It's interesting because you get into semantics about what that really means. Would you stand on, or is it like it's like another words for standing is like taking a position. And rather than taking a position on something, an issue, a topic, standing on or of what do we stand for? Could be a lot of different, gradations of meaning in terms of how we want to break that down. But we choose the speakers committee chose to use the theme of what do we stand on, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But in the course of my studies, I came across an interesting concept which kind of explains why I put myself on a little bit of a hiatus from speaking here at Unity, because of this concept that it was kind of like it's like catching a little bit of a cold, or you kind of have the flu, but you're not really don't have the flu. But the larger illness of the virus is the flu, and you come down with the flu, and you have all the symptoms and everything like this. Well, this concept that I came across in my studies is called lineal phase. And let me read to you what that means. It kind of spoke to what I kind of went through in terms of when I was out there doing a little deeper work with myself and kind of being out there in the wilderness, you kind of like what Jesus did when he went into the wilderness for 40 days and he was tempted by the adversary in terms of our negative side, our negative things that happen to us, or we think are negative, whatever it is that we're dealing with in terms of challenges, in terms of us trying to recover and connect and stay connected with our divine self. But this idea of limacy, where is it here? And I found this from a writing by Reverend Sylvia Hayes about the liminal phase. And she says this, and this I kind of had a kind of a similar experience, but not totally, but at least it helped define what I was going through spiritually and psychologically for a period of time. In anthropology, in the study of cultures, we have clear rites of passage rituals. There is a concept known as liminal phase, which is the point in a profound life stage ritual in which the initiate has lost their old identity and place in society, but has not yet been granted the new status and been reintegrated into society. More recently, liminality has crossed over from anthropology into psychology, and it is used to describe when a person suffers a major life upheaval that shakes us loose from our familiar position in community or society. This is usually a very challenging space for a person to remain in because it is attached from familiar routines and social interactions and support. The sense of liminality, of being in between the old and new way of being, often hits us when we experience sudden, intense, life-changing events. This can happen when a young person moves off to college, when we retire from a career, when someone gets released from prison, or when we suffer serious, prolonged illness, death of a loved one, or loss of social standing, or bullying or ostracism. Um, so there is a kind of a self-alienation from what your old self and then that in between place between your old self and kind of like shedding your skin like a snake and discovering another layer of your divine identity. And this is kind of like what I was kind of going through when I was just doing a period of self-reflection. It was very instructive. And this idea of liminal phase fits perfectly with that. So we're not meant to stay in this liminal phase, but it gives us a period of time when we make transitions from our old selves and old ways of thinking into new ways of thinking, to new way of being. To put it more concisely, what Jesus said, he said, you must be born again. Born again. Well, how is that possible? The one person asked, says, well, I can't go through my mother's womb again. So, no, you don't get it. It's you got to be reborn in terms of spirit. We are new creatures, as they say, in Christ. And I always like to say, behold, the Christ in you, the hope of glory. It's from Corinthians, but it's so powerful when you break that down. The business leader Jim Rohn had a great example. And he talked about the Old Testament being a great rule book of how to, how civilizations should run themselves. And he said there's basically two things in the Old Testament that he was constantly repeating. It's either beware, don't do what these clods did, or behold, look at this amazing miracles that God is capable of doing. Beware, behold. So we say, behold the Christ in you. It's like a wake-up call. Behold, Christ in you, the hope of glory. And that's something, what lives with me every day in terms of how I want to have my associations with people by stopping before, we are by our human nature are judgmental. We make evaluations. You shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but they do. But nevertheless, our practice is to take a excuse me. Sorry, Jeff. Uh, is to take a breath and remove that judging and see, behold the Christ in other people as well as yourself. Because by seeing it in other people, you're seeing it in yourself. You're letting more of the Christ express in you. Kind of a two-way street in terms of how that dynamic works in our spiritual lives, living a spiritual life, our spiritual understanding. So this idea of liminality is a great kind of anchoring point for me in terms of realizing that, like everybody else, I'm not alone in questioning where I'm at any given day in terms of, how connected am I to the divine within myself? Or am I just kind of has this self-talk in terms of affirmations and denials that, yeah, I can do all that, but are they really sinking in? Are they integrating? They're really changing how I live my life on a day-to-day basis. I mean, all right, so that level of belief, that liminal phase where you're realizing that you can no longer be this person that you are or were, but also you're facing, today the challenges of trying to create yourself as a new being are it's the work that we do. I'd like to just talk about Paul Hasselbeck a little bit. Paul Hasselbeck is probably one of Unity's most preeminent Unity scholars. He's written a lot of books over the years, but he has been instrumental in taking the archaic language of Charles and Myrtle, in terms of the these and the thous and the old English kind of uh, language, and bringing them forth into a contemporary framework in terms of how you can apply that, or we can relate to our spiritual nature in a more common sense way, without a lot of too much metaphysical jargon that gets in the way of us trying to connect with the spirit. And so he cautions the fact that, our ideas and our conceptions of God being this anthropomorphic being in the clouds throwing thunderbolts at people he displeases, or he or she in terms of even gender. Um, we have to understand that God is spirit, and we transcend above these anthropomorphic kind of images and models that we've been conditioned to believe over a period of time. Is more than just it's interesting, in Genesis where the host says, God says, let us make man in our image, in our own image. And it always puzzled me when it said the word us. Let us make man. I mean, who is God talking to at that point? Of course, Moses, was the author of Genesis, but it's interesting that it was put into this group context, and that um, we are God created us in His image, and this is just this is biblical referencing I'm talking about here, and so we're being conditioned to think about God in these kind of anthropomorphic ways, although Paul Hasselbeck has encouraged us to think beyond that, to look at God as spirit, omnipotent everywhere and everything and everywhere, even in us. We've been so we've stuffed so much stuff inside of us, in our journey, that we're in the process as spiritual beings trying to get rid of some of this baggage that's accumulated. And that's why every Sunday I feel so blessed to be able to come to a place where people are doing the same thing as I'm doing. We're trying to reconnect with the divine within us through prayer, meditation, and through various people talking about their own spiritual experience. But I really like what Paul Hasselbeck has done in terms of making it more accessible, per se, to people who believe in the unity principles, but they need a little bit more clarity in terms of the language. And speaking of him, I came across a short little article that he wrote on the principles of unity, and specifically when he talks about understanding. And if you bear with me, I'll read a little bit of that. It's understanding the power, principle, divine ideas of our ability to know, understand, and comprehend. There are at least three types or ways to use the principle of understanding. Sense understanding. This is more commonly known as sense consciousness. It is knowing based on the information provided by our physical senses. Intellectual understanding. Understanding based on human intellect. The intellect is the source of human intelligence. Often we get an intellectual understanding of truth, universal principles, and laws before it ripens into spiritual understanding. On the other hand, it confirms our sense consciousness. Seeing is believing. And that is kind of like relates to Thomas, the disciple who is known as the doubting Thomas. He wanted to see the nail marks in Jesus' hand. So seeing is believing. And spiritual understanding, finally. This understanding based on universal principles and laws. It is based on the universal principle, which includes all principles. And spiritual understanding is the ability of the mind to apprehend and realize the laws of thought and the relation of universal principles one to another. That is something through which we understand universal principles, laws, and ourselves. And I said before, that we make the distinction by following our spiritual understanding as opposed to trying to do it on ourselves, which can lead into a messy situation. In fact, what Clive has said about, she quoted, where is her name? Where is it? It's Sharon Connor writes in Adventures in Resilience. Spiritual understanding gives us the vision to see through the mists of our experience to the highest, most life-enhancing truth. It helps us find the miracle and meaning in the mess. In this awareness, we can make informed decisions about our responses to people and life circumstances rather than reacting. That's what I said before. Before we judge, we take a breath and we see the Christ in someone else, and then we can understand. It opens the door to more compassion and understanding. The Paul Hasselbeck goes on and concludes with how to use the principles of understanding in the realm of mind or consciousness. We use it to understand things of our senses things of our intellect, and most importantly, universal principles, laws, and how to use them. In our bodies, the physical realm, we use it to know things about our bodies, how they work, what to feed them, how to exercise. We use spiritual understanding to know the 12 powers and other universal principles and the way we use them to manifest health, wholeness, and well-being. And finally, in the outer physical realm, we use it to manipulate the physical realm for our mental and physical comfort and to wisely manifest things more aligned with our deeper, unchangeable beingness based on principle and law. So it's taking in the big picture, understanding things that I know, the things I've experienced. Uh, can I relate them to other people so they understand and have, understanding of me? Vice versa, I understand them. If there's this level of understanding, and the clearest way for spiritual understanding is to behold the Christ in the other person, thereby beholding the Christ in oneself. Now, how are we doing on time here? Speaking of our theme, what do we stand on? When we say we, I'm assuming that's our spiritual community, people who follow the unity teachings and they're students of unity. But not only that, but also anybody and everyone who has a kind of an inkling of Christian identity. In other words, they feel they are Christian orientated in terms of their knowledge of what Jesus the Christ did while he was on this earth in terms of his mission. And us in unity considering him as our way shower, that what he did, we could do much more if we really do the work. And that's quite a challenge in terms of our spiritual beings having a human experience. But I came up with this list of 25 divine principles on which Christian identity stands on. So I was just going to go through this, and something might push your button, your spiritual understanding button. And you might have a quick reflection about how you react to the particular principle. But they're all universal in terms of our Christian identity and how we understand what it is like, or what it is to try to, not try, but to reveal more of our Christ nature. So please bear with me as we go through this list. Just consider some of the things that I say in terms of the 25 points. It's like, what was that? David Letterman's late night show, they had the countdown. Remember that countdown? Number one, number two, number three. They went through this list of, and finally the last number, and everybody was relieved that the list was over. But hopefully you'll get something from this. Number one, 25 divine principles on which Christian identity stands on. One, God gives strength to the weary. Two, God will give you rest. Three, God never fails. Four, God has redeemed you. Five, God has adopted you. Six, God will fight for you. Seven, God gives wisdom to those who ask, to those that ask. Eight, God's light repeals the darkness. Nine, God forgives our errors. 10, you are reborn in Christ. 11, God forgives when we forgive. 12, God exalts the humble. 13, God will never forsake you. 14, God gives us eternal life. 15, God will set you free. 16, believe you have received what you have asked for in prayer. 17, God will meet all your needs. 18, call on God and God will answer. 19, God will give you the desires of your heart. 20, God will never remove your name from the book of life. 21, all things work for good for those that love God. You've heard that before. 22, all things will be added when you first seek the kingdom. 23, God will make your path straight. 24, God has prepared a place for us. And 25, are you ready? we release, we release to the indwelling Christ within. And that's all I'm really saying to you today, is release yourself to the Christ within. And all these things, these bullet items, they all accumulate into the one thing that we can do in terms of our spiritual nature, is to release ourselves to our indwelling Christ. You might be thinking about it, so kind of warm up to the idea, well, how's my indwelling Christ doing today? Check in. It's so hot. Well, I better kind of pray on this a little bit, or maybe do a little more meditation. Um, but the fantastic thing is that the indwelling Christ is always there. It never went anywhere. It was with us when we came into this world, and it will be with us when we leave this world. It's all a matter of relationships. What is your relationship to your own indwelling Christ? How do you address that on a day-to-day basis? Sometimes is it friend? Is it foe? Is it the adversary or is it the advocate? I would choose to stand for the advocate as opposed to the adversary. I've done the adversary thing. It's quite a ride, but in the end, it's ain't much fun. I'd rather go for the advocate that is looking out for my own good, my highest good. Wants to clean off that sooted lamp so my light can emanate more luminosity in the world, and therefore let other people see my light and give me the ability to see other people's light and know that I'm not alone in my journey. It's to me, the metaphysical aspects of our nature are so simple, but it's our human intellect that want to complicate things up and make a muck of things. We don't, we can't accept the simplicity of yes, no, perhaps. Always like the cowboy saying, yep, nope, maybe. So today, I encourage you to think about your advocate, your indwelling Christ. Deepen your understanding of your relationship with your own divine self. That's our work. And we come together and we share our personal revelations that we have, the ahas, the truth of our being, the truth of who we are, the core self of us that we want to share, be open, loving, compassionate beings that we are meant to be.